A frequency distribution is shown below. Complete parts A through E, the number of dogs per household in a small town, and here's the frequency distribution with dogs being 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 per household, and this column or row indicates the number of households that has respectively 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 dogs. To start, we're going to go ahead and create the frequency distribution corresponding probability distribution. And in order to do that, we first need to understand that P of x will be equal to the frequency of each x divided by the sum of the frequencies. I'm going to use StatCrunch to do the majority of the calculations here, so I will left click on this icon right here, which will allow me to open the data set in StatCrunch. I'm going to go ahead and move this around and do a little bit of manipulation so that I can have a little bit of extra room. Now the first thing we need to do is determine what the sum of the household is, so we'll left click Stat, left click Summary Stats, then Columns. I'm going to left click Households, and then I want to find Sum in this list and left click that. Notice that Sum is the only one that's showing here. Left click Compute, and I now have the sum. The sum is 1815, and in order to find P of x, which is going to be the next column, we're going to go ahead and divide each one of these values that's in this column by 1815. To do that, I'm going to left click Data, left click Compute, and then left click Expression. Left click Build, and now what I'm going to do is left click Households, add column. I'm going to then divide by 1815. So left click Divide, and then I can simply type in the number 1815. Left click OK, left click Compute, and we now have our new column that shows all of the different P of x's, and I would then transfer these values over here into each one of these data fields. And let me go ahead and do that. Assuming that I have not made any mistakes when I've typed these in, I will left click Check Answer, and I have the correct probability distribution. The next thing is to find the mean. Now remember that the mean is found by using this formula right here, the summation of x times P of x. So I need to go ahead and find x times P of x, and then sum the P of x. So once again, we're going to use StatCrunch. Left click Data, Compute, Expression, left click Build, and now we're going to multiply the x column, which happens to be dogs, by the P of x column, which is going to be households, divided by 1815. So left click Dogs, add column, times, left click Households divided by 1815, left click Column, and then we will left click OK, compute, and we now have a new column that is each individual x times P of x. Now I need to actually add those to get the mean, so we'll left click Stat. Once again, the Summary Stats, Columns. We're going to select this column, and we're going to select Sum, because that's the only thing that we want. So we left click Sum, left click Compute, and I now have a new sum, which is 0.584. Notice, however, that it says round to the nearest tenth is needed, so this should be 0.6. Assuming that I have not made any mistakes, I type in left click, and I check my answer, and I've done a good job. Next thing is to find the variance. Once again, we're going to go to the formula sheet here. The variance is going to be found using this formula right here. We're going to find x minus mu, we're going to square it, then we're going to multiply it by P of x, and then we're going to add all of those values together. Once again, I can use StatCrunch to do this. And we'll go over to StatCrunch, and we're just going to calculate what's going on here. So what I'm going to do is left click Data, go to Compute, left click Expression, left click Build, and now I'm going to build my expression. This is x minus mu, which means that I'm going to take the dog column right here. I'm going to add the column. I'm going to then subtract the mean. Now what I want to do is go ahead and use this entire value here. I don't want to round it to 0.6 because then I'm looking at round off error. I can just take it out to 3 or 4 decimal places. I could round it to 0.585, and that's what I'm going to do here for this, and we'll type in 0.585. Now I do want to square this, so I'm going to go ahead and put parentheses around the expression, which I forgot to do to start with, and then we're going to square it. So we want to raise this to the second power. Oops. Let's click outside the parentheses. We're going to raise this to the second power by left-clicking this. We're going to left-click 2. Then we're going to multiply it by the probabilities. So we multiply, and remember that the probabilities is this column, households divided by the total frequency, or sum. We left-click OK. Oops, and I forgot to finish that. I need to click Add Column. See how easy it is to correct any mistakes you might make. Left-click OK. Left-click Compute. And now we have a new column. And now I need to add this column together to get the variance. Once again, we'll go to Stat. We'll go ahead and go to Summary Stats. Left-click Columns. Left-click this last column. And I'm going to highlight Sum and add them together. And now here's my sum for the variance, 0.93706. Note that this says round to the nearest tenth. Assuming that I have not made any mistakes, we'll type in 0.9, and we will left-click Check Answer, and we have the correct variance. Now we need to find the standard deviation of the probability distribution. Once again, using my formula sheet, we find that the standard deviation, sigma, is equal to the square root of the variance. So all I need to do is take the square root of the variance. I can go ahead and use a calculator if I want to, but since I have been using StatCrunch, I'm going to go ahead and continue this. Actually, I take that back. I cannot use StatCrunch to find the square root. So I will reach for my calculator. I'm going to simply take the square root of 0.9, and I will end up with the value of 0.948. Once again, we're going to round to the nearest tenth as needed. So that will also be 0.9. And now we need to interpret the results in the context of the real-life situation. Notice that the mean is 0.6 and the standard deviation is 0.9. So we're going to look at the fact that this one says a household on average has 1 dog with a standard deviation of 0.6 dogs. That does not work for the standard deviation that we have or the average that we have. A household on average has 0.6 dog with a standard deviation of 1 dog. While the mean is correct, the standard deviation is incorrect. Once again, C also has an incorrect mean and an incorrect standard deviation, leaving us with D. A household on average has 0.6 dogs with a standard deviation of 16 dogs. We'll go back up and we'll look at B, because this one obviously has been rounded from 0.9 to 1, and that would be the answer.